Hello, hello, and welcome back to Ambitious. All right, so today we are going to be nerding out on marketing. And as a little preface going into today, I am not somebody before coming into business who knew anything about marketing. And so if you are someone who also doesn't know anything about marketing, or you feel like it just feels like this foreign concept to you, it feels like a different language, which in some aspects it definitely is. It definitely feels like that. Marketing is really truly its own mastery. It literally is things obviously that people have a degree for. It's its own degree. It really is its own aspect of mastery. And so something that I want to first acknowledge is if you don't know a lot about marketing, the exciting part about it is if you nerd out on it and actually desire to learn it, it is something that is something you can develop as a learning, as a knowledge, as a skill, actually pretty easily, in my opinion. Marketing, thankfully, is a matter of, yes, there's an aspect of it, which is the creative, which is really getting an understanding of when you see, for example, someone's reel that they make or a video they create or an image that they do, there is a creative aspect to it. So if you're not as creatively inclined, it can feel a little bit more resistant to come up with those ideas and concepts. So that is a muscle that you have to flex. But the thing that I think is the exciting part about it is marketing is actually quite heavily rooted in frameworks, structures, certain rinse and repeat strategies, and also, which is the part we're going to be getting into today, it's actually very much rooted in psychology of why people do what they do and how to get people to take action in the timeline we want. And when we push this button that people do this thing. And so the exciting part about marketing is for me, and again, this might be just my nerdy brain on this, I actually feel like I understand things that were always in my life or things that I would always see. And I see promotions at Starbucks and I see a sign at Costco when I go to get groceries, and I can actually see the marketing intention around it now. And so it's been actually really empowering as well, because when you start to learn marketing, you understand what quote unquote tactics are being used against you. And it also helps you to understand what tactics businesses are using that are causing people to take action. The root of marketing and the basis of what we're going to dive into today is really the basis of the psychology of why we do what we do and how our audiences and us, how we respond to things through marketing strategy. And so today we're going to be going over what I call the mental triggers of marketing, which is basically going over the top 6 buttons that are internally based in the way that we're wired as individuals, as a society, the ways that we, from a psychology-based perspective, are wired and why we do what we do and why we respond to things in the way in which we do. And so when I learned this, the thing I want to preface is marketing is a very fine line between the understanding of these principles and this psychology. But if you put it into, on the other side, the hands of the wrong person, this is where marketing gets really manipulative and can really become a place that doesn't feel fun and doesn't feel supportive and doesn't feel ethical, frankly, or moral. And so because we're going to be talking about psychology today and how that ties into marketing, I also want to really set the frame of your intention in the way in which you use these. And most importantly, the values that are the underbelly of the work that you do with this is probably one of the most important pieces of it, because you can have person A and person B who know the strategies we're going to go over today. And if person A is an ethical business owner who really does care about their clients, care about their audience, they're very, very focused on running an ethical, heart-centered, frankly, based business, the way in which they're going to execute these strategies and to be able to put these into place are going to be very different than the other individual who knows the impact of these and what these cause humans or individuals to do. And most importantly, the person who knows how it could be used for their own gain. And so there's a very fine line. We have to make sure that when we're going to go through these, remember that this is psychology. This is literally the understanding of the human brain and understanding of, how humans are wired and the behavior that they have. So we want to respect these principles. We want to respect the essence of where they come from. And we also want to respect the way in which we use them in our businesses. And so for the basis of today, we're going to go over the top 6 mental triggers of marketing, which the way I want you to define this in your mind is the understanding of the psychology of why our audiences do what they do and how we can better understand that to help ourselves in our marketing and really figure out where we might be missing the mark. So I'm going to go over the super high level of them. So number one, we're going to be going over reciprocity. Number two is commitment. 3 is social proof. 4 is liking. 5 is authority, and 6 is what you definitely know from the online world and business world, which is scarcity. So we're going to go through one by one, and I'm going to kind of break them down for you and also give you some examples of what these look like in, day-to-day life, so that you're not just seeing them as well in the marketing perspective, but also what do these actually mean for us in our lives day to day. So the first one we're going to go into is reciprocity. And reciprocity at its basic essence is when you offer something to somebody, you create this aspect of indebtedness. And so really it's what makes somebody then in turn feel that they owe you and want to reciprocate. So again, basis of this being reciprocity, the aspect of the desire to reciprocate. So when we give, for example, small favors to people, it in turn means that we also have them desiring to give back to us or to reciprocate with a equal, if not larger favor to quote unquote make up for it or to pay back for it. And so the example basically being when you think about when people say, go and serve your audience and go and support people, one of the things that I will say has been the basis of a lot of my marketing success actually is reciprocity. Because I go from the lens, even with this podcast, like I am an open book. If you have a topic you want me to talk about, shoot me a DM. If you have a question you want me to answer, you can literally submit it through our website for our Q&A episodes. Like everything that I have in marketing through Instagram, I do lives of free coaching. I'm actually in the middle right now of what we called our scale sessions, which is really where I'm literally doing free coaching, which this week was like 3 hours and it's like $200 kind of thing for the month. And these are all different aspects of reciprocity. And that's because the essence of the being when you give significantly and you really do so in a way that is truly giving. I'm not talking about it giving with an agenda. Like, when you listen to this episode and you listen to past episodes, like I am not withholding information. I'm like, hey, and this is how you're going to execute it. And this is what you're going to do. And this is what you're going to consider. Like I want this to be a manual for you, right? Like I want this to be something that you can come back to every week and get nuggets and go. But the marketing intention around all these things that I do is really me flexing the muscle of reciprocity, which is me taking the basis of when I give, I know that if I give to my audience, I am creating a dynamic in which someone wants to give back. So for example, if you're listening to this podcast, if you're on my live hot seat coachings, if you're, in my DMs and I'm coaching you on, hey, here's what I would give you as advice. When I'm doing that, obviously I want to serve your face off. So like that's something that I always enjoy doing and that's not going to change. But there's also this aspect for me of like my quote unquote selling or my quote unquote marketing is really from using the pillar of reciprocity, which is I know when I give, the natural psychology of most people and the way in which we're wired is when someone gives to us, we feel this indebtedness that we want to give back. So then when you're experiencing a problem in your business or you're, you face a resistance with your marketing or your sales, or you feel like you're ready to scale to the next level, that can be a moment where you go, you know what? I have been listening to Kate's podcast. Hopefully you'll be saying this in a couple of years. I've been listening to Kate's podcast for 3 years and I've been going to her lives and she's coached me on this. Like I'm going to reach out to her and see what it's like to work with her because there's this aspect of recognition of what has been provided. And it's not for everybody in the sense of the fact, like, it's not just because I've coached someone or just because you've listened to an episode that that's going to be you. But the point is the basis of reciprocity comes from the belief that when we give, we know that human beings are naturally wired to give back. And so reciprocity basically comes from the aspect of reciprocation. When we give, there's a natural inclination from our audience and the people who listen and consume us to reciprocate to us. So that's when people say like, oh, like don't give away your best stuff. I'm like, no, give away everything. Give away literally everything because your lens of giving is directly connected to what you get. And so like for me, anytime I want to get more, I give more. Like that's really genuinely one of the strategies that we use in our business. And so think about it, for example, an example or analogy I give to people is like, you show up to a party or you show up to something and your friend says, hey, I got you a gift. Like I got this for you. I thought of this thing and I got it for you. And you didn't get them something. You're like, oh my God, like they got me a gift. They gave this thing to me and I don't have anything in return. I feel like I need to bring something, right? Or when your friend hosts a party at their house and they are like, hey, we're going to host. We just need you guys to show up. You're like, no, we got to bring something. We got to bring something. They're hosting. We have to give back, right? Or when someone does a favor for you, you're like, listen, I got you. Like, let me know whatever I can do. Like, please let me help in some way. I have to reciprocate for the nice thing that you did. Your neighbor shovels your driveway for you on surprise. And you're like, oh my God, I have to go bring him something to thank him, right? There's in all these aspects in our lives, these aspects of reciprocation. And so the same thing is true in your business. When you give, you're naturally creating in that person's mind, not that they're saying, oh, like she's using reciprocity on me. They're just, when you're giving, we're wired in such a way that we want to give back. And so there are pieces that make reciprocity so effective. So one of the first things is you can offer something first. You want to be the first person to offer something out of your relationship. So for me, with many of my audience members, like I'm somebody who's been the first to give them something. And the dynamic between me, for example, and you, me offering this podcast to you in our relationship. Yes, hi, we're in a relationship. Between the relationship between us, I'm the first person to give something. Now, not always. You may be like, hey, Kate, I sent you something. And so if so, then this doesn't apply to you. But in our relationship together, you and I, this is me giving something to you. So in our dynamic, I am the first to have given. So that is an aspect of reciprocity, which is trying to be the first to give. So for example, again, back to our analogy, if we are the first to give someone a favor in a sense of the dynamic between you. So say you have a new friend and they give you a favor for something and that's the first one, that's usually followed with I have to do something back, right? So being first can be an aspect of it. The second thing is also making sure that it's something that is personalized and something that is also exclusive. So it should, by exclusive, I mean, it should feel like something that is special. So like for me, I fully, for myself, do special Q&As dedicated to those who listen to Ambitious. So like if you're listening to Ambitious, I cue you and I actually am in my DMs with you. Like you're reaching out to me and saying, hey, I loved this episode. Hey, I had a question about this. Like I connect with you guys every single week after our episodes to be like, hey, like what hit home for you? I don't do that with every single person in my audience. Like I love this community. And so as a part of it, there is an aspect of exclusivity for those who listen to this in the sense of the awarenesses you're going to have, the information you're going to have access to. Like it is only available on Ambitious. Like you're not going to get the same depth of content anywhere else. So there's an aspect of exclusivity with our relationship here. And there's also this aspect when you're looking at giving, saying, is this something exclusive for a community? So you'll also see reciprocity with email lists, right? And people say, I'm giving a exclusive bonus to my email list. There's an aspect of reciprocity when it's exclusive that also makes it super effective. The other thing is as well, is that you want to also personalize it. So the thing that I will say with giving and when you give to people is the giving needs to be personalized. It needs to not be giving in the aspect of what you just decide you want to give, but giving in the way in which it would be supportive for the individual who's receiving it. So, for example, for me, I have with this podcast, I literally tell people, I'm like, hey, send me topics, send me whatever would be helpful for you in this stage of your business and like what would be supportive for you. And I will put that in the episodes. So having the personalization of the offering and of the give to someone is important because giving feels the best when what you receive is something that you immensely value. So the thing where people miss the mark on reciprocity is the fact that they just want to give in the lens of what they want to give. It's not actually with the desire of the individual on the receiving end. So for me, I think part of the reason that the reciprocity principle and this trigger, marketing trigger number one, has been so impactful for me is because I always personalize the give. So like for me, I don't put things out to my audience just to put them out. I put them out because you told me you wanted it, which is why I made it or why I'm giving it. So people say my biggest piece of feedback with my business and brand is like, I really just love your hot seat coaching. Like I want to just ask you questions about my business. And so that's why I say, hey, listen to the podcast, shoot me a message. Listen to the podcast, go to the form on our website and submit a question for our Q&A episodes and we'll answer it there. Come to scale sessions and go to my lives and do Q&As. Like that's why I do Q&A. It's not just because I love Q&A, like I do, but a lot of what I do is created with the end user in mind and what they value. And I think a lot of businesses miss the mark with Reciprocity because they only give to their audience what they decide they want to give. It's like, oh, I feel like I have this extra resource or I have this extra time, so this is what I'm going to give my people. Reciprocity is the most impactful when it's a personalized giving and a personalized offer of what does the person on the end side want. So you want to ask yourself, your audience right now, or your listeners, or your subscribers, or your clients even, what is it that they desire? What is it that they want? And are we giving them what they desire or just simply what we have opted that we want to give? And again, can you have aspects of exclusivity with your email list, with your podcast listeners, with your broadcast channel, whatever it might be in the sense of whichever avenue? So reciprocity, again, is the aspect of when we give, we want to ideally be first, we want it to be exclusive, and we want it to be a personalized thing that we give to people. And so it really is the aspect of when we give, there is this deep desire and there is a psychology root that when someone gives to us, we have a natural pull to want to reciprocate. And that typically comes with the aspect in business of investment. So mental trigger number 2 is commitment. And one of the things that you can do within your community is have people take micro commitments in the leading toward a larger commitment with you. So the basis of the psychology around it is that when we make a decision, typically, and this is really like the basis of our subconscious, when we decide something in our brain or in our subconscious, our mind really wants to close that loop and solidify and basically conclude that belief or decision. So when we state something, our brain's desire is to make it complete. Like that's how we're wired as individuals. And so when we use this for our audience, we're asking them to commit to something. We want people to commit to a perspective. We want people to commit to an opinion. We want people to commit to a certain type of identity. And so when they do that, people also are going to struggle to pull from that. So when you're creating a brand, you first need to figure out what are your beliefs and what is your identity, right? So what do you stand for? What are your values? What do you believe in? Who are you? If you were going to ask someone to stand with you, what do you stand for? And the thing with this principle, and we often see this as an example with, public commitments, right? So say, this is very obvious example when it comes to politics. A lot of people, when they vocalize which party they support, whichever party that is, when you vocalize which party you support, it can be very difficult when someone has vocalized commitment to a certain party to then go back to the other party or to switch their opinion. We also see this, for example, in things like, for example, like being vegan or something along that line, a very strong belief in something. When you claim that strong belief, saying like, I'm vegan and like, this is a way of living, this is what my values are. When you state and vocalize a commitment publicly, you naturally, from a psychology-based perspective, feel that you have to follow through on that, even if at moments you may not necessarily feel that you want to be vegan anymore. You might have a doubt about being vegan. And because of the public commitment to that, you may stay vegan out of the basis of the fact, well, I committed to this, so I'm going to stick to it. So what basically ends up happening is we have this kind of automatic compulsion to stick with decisions that we've already made. And so with this, it basically means that when we ask our audience to make commitments to us, they also will stay in line with those commitments that we ask of them. So, for example, we often want to try to encourage our audience to take a stand, to take a commitment. So this can be around your brand. Like, I don't believe in shame-based marketing. Okay, so I don't believe in like, oh, I'm going to make you feel like crap to make you buy from me. Like, I just don't believe in that. So for me, if I don't believe in shame-based marketing, then I want to vocalize to my audience, here's what I believe, here's what I stand for. Do you agree? I want them to take a stand with the beliefs that I have in the same accordance with those beliefs and have them vocalize those publicly. Or like this could be with like a poll, this could be with something where you're showcasing people coming together around a shared idea. the belief or the root of this being that we want someone to publicly showcase that they have shared beliefs with us. So when someone makes this decision and they showcase this, it leads them to deeper and deeper connection and deeper commitment to staying consistent with those beliefs, i.e., deeper and deeper with going into your brand, deeper and deeper into alignment with what they've committed to you. The more people commit, both publicly and privately, to you and your brand and you and your beliefs, the more connected they are to you and your brand, because they are someone who's naturally wired to stick with their commitments. And so we basically want to ask for small requests and small questions of our audience, which then in turn has them basically primed for the larger decisions they need to make. And so, for example, if you ask your audience questions and get them to commit to certain beliefs and perspectives and values along the way, when the time comes and they need to support you in a certain belief or in a certain type of support of a value, they are more committed to doing so because they've been committing to you in micro ways along the way. So as an example, if someone is making micro commitments to me, for example, with the podcast, you're listening to this and you're making micro little commitments with me along the way. If I say, hey, I'm launching a podcast merch line and I'm going to launch a sweatpant line for you to listen to Ambitious in your sweatpants, which also, I will be honest, I'm highly considering. So you guys can let me know in the DMs if you feel like that would be supportive. But with this, I would also be looking at the fact that there's micro commitments in each time that you listen, because there's certain beliefs that you stand with me on potentially. And then that means when I put something out that is my bigger commitment to you, you've been in micro commitments and relationship along the way. So commitment at its basic essence is realizing that when we ask our audience to commit to a belief or a decision, we are ultimately indirectly giving them the ability to commit to us on a larger scale. We need small commitments along the way with our marketing, with our messaging, with our brand before we can ask for a big commitment. For example, if I was to create, when I create a merch line for Ambitious, you wouldn't wear the merch for Ambitious unless you believed in the perspectives and the message and the tone of Ambitious. Like if you didn't believe in the perspectives I talk about here, why would you want to rock the merch? Whereas if you're someone who I've said things on the podcast and you're like, that hits for me, that hits for me, that hits for me, you're making these micro little commitments along the way. So when I ask for the big commitment of, hey, buy a sweatsuit, like rock the merch, rock the quotes that we're going to put on this stuff, you're open to the big commitment because you've already been committing along the way with whatever brand you're consuming. Maybe it's the podcast, maybe it's someone else's social media, and then the big commitment is their program. Maybe, it's commitment to somebody. And then, for example, if someone has a lot of attention online, for example, like an influencer, you go because you've committed to them along the way, that if they're under fire and getting canceled online, you're in there because you're committed to them and you're sticking with your commitment of support to them. So when we make micro commitments, we are more primed as individuals for larger commitments, which is why sometimes our audience will buy things because they've been committing to us all along the way. So second one is going to be commitment, and the recognition that and realizing that when people take action, it's because they stick to the commitments they make to themselves. Our brain is designed that way. So what you want to do as a brand is ask your audience to commit to your beliefs, to commit to your values, if they stand with them, of course, and to really commit to little micro pieces with you. So like for myself, I know that every single individual that I coach is someone who's committed to doing business heart-centered. Like if you work with me, you're not going to be a bully in business and work with me. I'm just not going to stand for it. So for me, when you commit to working with me along the way and even listening to this, you know my values listening to the podcast. You know what I believe and what I support. And if someone doesn't fall in line with those things, then they're probably not someone who's going to be committed to me because they wouldn't have committed along the way. So number 3 of our mental triggers, and this one is going to be something you probably have experienced, but I want to break down a little bit of the why as to why it's so effective. Social proof. Everyone and their mom in the online world knows social proof. Either you're someone who posts it all the time or you're getting inundated with it quite a bit. So social proof. Okay, the principle of social proof is we're more likely to accept and to purchase and to invest into something that we feel has been endorsed by somebody that we respect. We need to see proof of concept from someone or something else in order for us to feel safe to then invest and take action. So, a non-online world example would be when you go to a coffee shop. Like if you have a jar at a coffee shop and one is empty, okay? And it says tips here. And then you have another coffee shop and you put the jar there and you put, a series of $5 bills and some coin in it at the bottom of it. The basis of social proof, yes, we know it from the online world, but the basis of the principle being that we want to see proof of concept before we go and press go on something. We typically rarely want to be the first. We want to see proof of concept. So the coffee shop that had the jar that had nothing in the bottom of it and was completely empty, when an individual sees that and they don't see proof of concept, i.e. there's no money in it, they think, okay, well, that's something that basically nobody's giving tips, so I'm not going to give tips, in the sense of there's no proof that I should be giving tips here, hence social proof. If we go to the coffee shop though, and the second coffee shop does have bills in the bottom and it does have coins in it, what that means is that we see proof. We see proof that someone before us has come through and put down tips into this. So we're like, oh, people are submitting tips, $5 bills, $20 bills, whatever it might be. So now I'm going to give a tip as well. So what ends up happening with social proof really is the fact that we want to create a environment where people have proof of concept. And the psychology around this is, which is again why we say that these need to be put in the hands of the people who care only, these strategies, is because when you have proof of concept, individuals in a buying process or in any process like the tip jar become complacent. So it means that when we have social proof present, we don't question the next step as much because there's proof of, oh, just trust it. So really what ends up happening is when we use social proof, people become complacent and we don't really question the way that we would if there was no social proof. So let's go into some examples. For example, an expert in a certain topic. When we see somebody who is an expert in a certain topic, they have influence. They have social influence. So let's just say Andrew Huberman, who talks on the podcast all the time about products. He is an expert in his field and in the topics he discusses. So if he was to recommend, for example, like a supplement, or he was to recommend like a certain type of health regime, because of his expertise in his area, we are more likely to fall in line with investing into it or with, taking action in accordance with it because of his expertise. Another example, which is one that we're very, very commonly seeing, obviously, is celebrities, which is the fact that when somebody has been known to endorse a product or has been known to endorse a brand, what's basically happening there is the fact that the celebrity is the proof of the process, right? So we're seeing an example of somebody that we respect and somebody that we put value in saying, hey, you're good to go on XYZ. So that's why celebrities who start, for example, promoting and supporting cosmetic lines and start promoting and supporting, liquor lines and all these things. Those are basically them using their celebrity status as a tool to endorse a certain product. Also, peers. Think about like the easy one with this is like, think about when someone you don't know has cued you or given you advice. And they say, you should go left. And you're like, but I don't know you. And then you see your friend and your friend says, hey, like, I want to be honest with you. I really think that the best choice would be to go left. And you're like, okay, I'm going to go left. Because it's coming from somebody that you already have connection with. You already have trust in. And again, like you already know that this person has your interest, you have value in this person. So because of that, you're more likely to lean on their advice. Now, obviously, the one that we see a lot in the online world is the aspect of, past users. So like when someone, for example, is thinking about coaching with me, that's why we literally created our testimonial page on our website, because we know the impact of social proof. We know that, just as a little quick tip for you, when you're doing social proof, it's not just about showcasing the fact that someone should invest in the product or the service. It's also about showcasing two other things. There's actually an aspect of, which we're going to get into today, likeliness and likability. So likeliness, we actually like to see ourselves. So like you'll see big companies when they do commercials, they try, some companies really miss the mark on this still, but they try to have as much diversity as possible. And they really try to consider the models that they use in their marketing to be representative of the people who are watching and their ideal client. This is why when we use the likeliness of us in, or our ideal client in our marketing, people see themselves in it. So for you, what this means is in your social proof, I always tell people, try to use pictures of the individuals. Try to use pictures of your audience, of your clients, so people can literally see themselves in it. And it's, again, this is not a matter of like, oh, because she's blonde like me, I'm going to invest. There is this psychology perspective of when people have a likeliness to us, you are more inclined and more driven to act in accordance with that. The other thing that I also will say for your social proof, give context. So a lot of people will, for example, just say like, here's client Sarah, she was able to achieve X. What I want to know is specifics that will help the person who's consuming Sarah's social proof to say, oh, she's like me. So for my website, what I basically do is I help people to self-identify in a couple ways. I help them to self-identify with pictures, so showing the range of different clients that we serve. I showcase, like, in the sense of speaking to how old they are. I speak to the fact that we work with all different industries. I note the industry underneath their social proof so that they're very aware of the fact that this person does come from an agency or does come from like a bookkeeping business. Why do I do that? So that people in social proof can see, oh, she's a bookkeeper, I'm a bookkeeper. Or she's a business coach, I'm a business coach. Like, I want people to see themselves in what I market. So those are aspects that, like, in social proof, my rule of thumb is picture something that is specific about the individual that would be specifically connected to somebody else so they can self-identify, and then you insert the social proof of the person's experience. But I think the aspect of social proof is seeing proof of concept in another before us, and also seeing things being endorsed by those that we trust or by people who have a likeliness to us. So that's why the likeliness could be like other users, or it could be, again, people we trust, like our peers, celebrities, experts on a topic, and that sort of thing. So that is social proof. The next mental trigger is likability, which is the strength of a social bond that we have with somebody is like twice as likely to produce a sale for a business than the product itself will. So we tend to have the same beliefs. The people that we invest into typically are people that have the same beliefs, interests, and language that we do. So a little bit to the aspect of language, and we're going to kind of go into aspects of, what increases likability. So you often hear in marketing, people talk about like, no trust. Well, the like portion of the like, no trust is the fact that likability really comes down to the fact of how in tune the way in which you show up is showcased effectively to your audience that allows them to connect with you. Because when it comes to like, and even if you think about like recommendations from peers and things, right, and referrals, we often are very, very influenced by those that we like, those that we are invested in. And so this is a massive piece of why influencers also are super impactful. And there's parts that I want to say are massive pieces that make and increase likability. So from a psychology-based perspective, it has nothing to do with online business. There actually is an aspect of likability, which is like physical attractiveness. So like you will see this often with celebrities. The celebrities who are like stunning and gorgeous are sometimes, not always, but sometimes considered to be like, if you're thinking like a Brad Pitt or I don't know, like just like those gorgeous individuals, they are people that actually sometimes, regardless of who they are and their values, can have a aspect of likability, just simply like a physical attractiveness is actually a factor in likability between humans. So from a psychology-based perspective, it doesn't mean anything about the person's value. Now, similarity is also a big thing. So people like to invest in those that they feel they are similar to. And so when we come to similarities between you and your audience, this is why we talk a lot about sharing and being open and vulnerability and, really being, like an open book. Because the more that you share and the more that you're really forthcoming about who you are as an individual, as a brand, the more likely you are for your audience to actually see the similarities between you. When you don't showcase anything and you're not open and you're not transparent and you're not vulnerable, what it means is you're closed off. And what you're really doing by being that way is you're closing off opportunity for your audience to connect on the similarities that you guys have as individuals together. And so one of the aspects definitely is an aspect of similarities. Likability also can be impacted by compliments. So, for example, when you're in, like connections with your audience, giving compliments to your audience, giving compliments to the people in your DMs, acknowledging people, thanking people, those are pieces that actually deepen the likability with you and your brand between those in your audience. And also the aspect of cooperation and coming together. Like your beliefs need to be in similar desires to those of your audience. And so like for me, I think about when we think about what we're talking about in our marketing and in our brand, I really think about what is my audience fighting? Like what fight are you fighting right now in business? And like what fight are you trying to navigate and how can I support and lead and fight with you in that fight? And so for example, for us as a brand, we're very vocal about the fact of like why I started this, which is like less than 3% of female founded businesses hit 7 figures. So there's an aspect of likability with the cooperation of us as a brand, because when we vocalize, hey, that's not okay, and we're here to change the stat around how many women are hitting 7 figures every year in their business, by having the conversation around changing that stat and why that's important to us and what we believe and what our values are and all of those things, what we're also doing indirectly is we're having women standing with us. We're having people getting bought into that belief and that mission and being part of our brand, our audience, our customers are part of that because they stand with that mission. So we're sharing this kind of common goal and we're supporting the same cause together. And we're really showcasing how we have common values and common beliefs of the people that are in our world. Now, the other thing we also want to consider when it comes to likability is we typically only want to be associated with brands that have similar values, perspectives, and beliefs to ours. So if you are wanting somebody to, again, invest into your brand and business, the way that that happens is by them getting on the same page as you and them feeling like they have an understanding of what you believe and why you believe it to be true. And so again, if we're not showcasing any of that, it makes it exceptionally difficult. So I want to make a clear distinction here because it sometimes can be a little bit confusing for people when we go through these triggers. The social proof trigger versus likability. Likability is the aspect of how to showcase your likability to your audience. So again, likability coming from your similarities with your audience, having something that is a common goal or a shared objective, realizing that people only associate typically with businesses or brands that have similar values to them. And also like the physical aspect of a brand is also a big part of why people can get bought in. But the thing that I also want to acknowledge is that social proof, the way that social proof is created, social proof is the basis of seeing somebody that we already have likeliness to and that we already have investment into or we already have connection to, endorsing a product and creating an ask. And so I just want to make sure there's a clear distinction between those for you, because I know at times people have said, well, how does that work if we want to create likability versus social proof? What's the distinction? Okay. So the next mental trigger is authority. And this one, I was just talking to somebody about this literally like a couple hours ago, because we were talking about the fact of authority and how we determine authority, how we perceive authority. And so when we see somebody in an expert field or an expertise of some kind, we sometimes will actually assume that someone has understanding of something because they're deemed a quote unquote expert. So it's interesting in the online world, actually, we hear this a lot when people say like, oh, I'm a social media expert. I'm a, this expert. Well, when we say expert, the reason that people are saying that is because we also need to acknowledge that when someone showcases and vocalizes expertise, there is this assumed authority with the actual word expert. And also when we see visual aspects of someone being an expert. So I'll explain what I mean. The psychology around authority is that when we see people who we deem to be in authority, whether in the knowledge that they have, the label that they have, or the way they present themselves, the psychology of how we work is that we actually obey that person and we follow suit with their suggestions and their next steps because we perceive them to be an authority. An example of this being when you see say you're at the doctor's, you're walking around, you see somebody in a lab coat kind of thing, and you would just say, okay, that's a doctor. I'm going to go ask him. You just assume because you see his white coat that that's a doctor. You just assume because someone is wearing a police uniform that they're somebody of authority. You assume sometimes based off of perception, there to be a perceived authority. Now, here's the thing. The way that the brain works is when we believe someone to be a perceived authority, when we have a perception someone's an authority, we actually are more likely to be complacent. Again, this is why we talk about using these principles in an ethical way. You're more likely to be complacent if you think someone's an authority, and you're more likely to follow suit with whatever it is that they say and whatever they suggest because you believe they're a quote unquote authority. So this is why when we talk about like our titles of who we are and, our positions in this space, it's an important conversation because the way you present yourself as an authority, the reason people talk about this in business coaching a lot and show up as an authority, what they mean by that is basically saying stand firm in who you are and present yourself in such a way that people believe your opinion and your advice and ultimately will follow suit with what it is that you recommend. So again, this is why it's so important to do this in an ethical way. So what it means is when you basically pass somebody who has authority that you're going to just assume whatever they recommend. And so showcasing authority can be things like, again, professional appearance, like we're talking about with seeing a doctor or seeing a police officer is an aspect of authority. There's also indirect cues with a business. So like social proof, people saying she was able to get me here, there, or the other place is authority. Showcasing of what other people think about you. So if I have like a peer who's like, Kate's the best, or Kate does this really well, like if I have somebody endorse me, it naturally creates this aspect of authority. Also things like testimonials and proof of me being more places and more features is also something that ultimately creates authority. One of the things that I will say though, I think is probably one of the most impactful aspects of authority, and I don't really think this is connected to your Instagram bio or any of that. Like putting you as an expert in your bio is not what's going to make people feel like you're an authority. To be really honest, the number one moving needle in becoming an authority and having other people really have unshakable belief around you as an authority, in my opinion, comes from two C's: certainty and confidence. If you want someone to get bought into what it is you're saying as a brand, as a marketer, as a business, you need to have unshakable certainty in what you're saying. You need to have confidence in the things that you're communicating and the beliefs that you're speaking to and the messages that you're delivering. Some of the most impactful people that I have ever met, and the reason that I instantly felt their authority within 5 seconds of meeting them, was not because I knew what their resume was. It's not because I saw their social proof. It's not because I saw, where they were featured in magazines. I just met them at a conference. The reason that that person was already an instant authority in my mind is because of the level of confidence they had in their beliefs, their values, their message, and also connected to the aspect of certainty. Now, yes, that is the initial portion of authority that we then follow up with. If I was looking, again, I met someone at a conference and I knew this person was authority from the moment I met them. I was like, I don't know who that person is and all the depths of their stuff, but I can tell you that person is somebody, because I was like, the confidence and the certainty in the way they carried themselves, and not necessarily physical appearance. I mean, confidence wise, the confidence they had in themselves and what they said and how they said it. I was like, who the heck is that? And I then remember, which was part 2, I went and researched this person. And I literally spent hours being like, who was that? And so I started to go through and literally do research. What did I do when I researched? I looked at their social proof. I looked at their features. I looked at the evidence that I needed to kind of close the loop on, oh, that person is an authority. So the thing that I will say is, like, all of it is important, but the initial piece of why someone's going to feel your authority in any given circumstance is really a matter of your certainty and your confidence in the way you're communicating things to people day to day. Okay. The last but not least we're going to go into is something that could be its own podcast, which maybe one day it will be. But for today, we're going to go over scarcity. The basic essence of scarcity is that we feel driven to move, to get things, buy things, invest into things when we feel like they are not in abundance. So when something is in lack in our minds and there's very few of them left, we feel like, or very few of anything, if there's, last chance sales and one of a kind specials and anything like that, when we have an aspect of urgency and scarcity and lack, it is something that actually causes us to move. So here's the thing. This is why I say it could be its own episode, because scarcity is impactful. I use scarcity all the time in my business. So and the thing is, like, it's true. Like, we have a promotion coming up and there's genuinely limited amount of time on it. Like, it's not something that's like it's, this, that, or the other. It literally goes away. Like, once it's done, it's done. And so if you have genuine scarcity in your business, then it's something that you can absolutely use. Like, you can absolutely, showcase that in what you do. But the thing is, when it comes to scarcity is done in a variety of different ways. So for example, limited number, there's a limited supply of something. Part of an example of scarcity is if you think about like luxury handbags or luxury goods, or, there's some, for example, paintings where there's only X amount in the world. It makes them immensely more valuable for us to have. And it makes, because of that, something that we want to invest into. Like, if someone was going to invest thousands and thousands of dollars into a painting, the reason they're going to do that is because there's genuinely a limited number of those paintings, which in turn makes it, in our mind, perceived to be more valuable. So limited number of something does make somebody see things as valuable. And it also does make people typically move faster. When people think that there's a limited number of something, there's a lack, there's a scarcity. So because of that, they take action, they move. Our brain basically sees the countdown or sees, there's like 3 spots left and it wants to take action. Limited time, as I was also saying with limited, X amount of days left, limited time is also scarcity. So limited amount of spots, limited time is also a scarcity thing. The other thing that can also be a really commonly seen scarcity tactic is flash sales. So like one of a kind, one day, flash sale, everything's 50% off. You'll also see this sometimes on like when stores are closing at the mall, they'll have like a closeout sale or like a last chance sale kind of thing, or a moving sale with a big 50% off sign in the front. That is an aspect of urgency and scarcity. There's also this lens of, say, like there's a limited amount of spots, but it can also be a matter of a limited amount of things or a certain amount of things you have to have in order to get quote unquote in. And so scarcity really is probably one of the simplest, which is in the sense of executing within your business. It's really creating this aspect of lack in order to get people to move quickly, to move on something. Now, here's my bone to pick with scarcity. Scarcity should not be used in an unethical way. And what I mean by that is, like, you shouldn't be saying 2 spots left when you have 25 spots. You shouldn't be saying limited time only when it really technically is available all year. You shouldn't be using scarcity if it isn't real. It needs to be something that is actually real. Because what I will tell you is, if you use scarcity in an unethical way, or that isn't actually real, isn't really rooted in anything legitimate, what ends up happening is you're breaking trust with your audience. So when you constantly say something is limited time, but it's not limited time, what it also is telling your audience is not to trust you. And with that the scarcity, it's basically showing them each time you do that it's not actually real. So like, for example, for us, we do promotions. We do like limited time things all the time. Like I will do, like I have a limited time offer that would come out. That's like a discount only available for limited time, a bonus only available for a limited time. Like this is something that we have a promotion that we do, for example, every single year, and it's only in November, and it's a limited time thing. It's only for that set time in November, and that is it. And so it's not a matter of like, if you come to me in January and you ask for it, you're going to get it. I'm not going to do it. Like, it's a limited time. So I think the main thing with scarcity that I would really encourage is to make sure you're doing so ethically, and also make sure that you're not using this, especially as someone who teaches marketing and teaches sales, don't use this as something that is like the main way in which you're generating sales. You don't want to have to use scarcity as the only way to make people move. So when we're going over today's mental triggers, again, remembering we've got reciprocity, we've got the aspect of reciprocation, getting commitments, which is number 2. 3, showcasing of social proof. 4, really showcasing likability or increasing likeliness. And then you've got 5, which is authority. again, or perceived authority. And then we also have 6, which is scarcity and urgency. So with these mental triggers, why are these important to you with your business? Mental triggers are the understanding of the psychology of why people do what they do. And so all of these, reciprocity, social proof, scarcity, authority, we know that these are things that make people in our audiences move, that make them take action. But the thing that we need to keep in mind is that these need to be done in an ethical way. And that when you master each of these and you understand the ways, because there's a multitude of ways that you can integrate each one of these principles in your business. So like something that we often teach is like going through strategies with people of like how to increase likeliness and how to, flex the muscle of reciprocity and how to do effective scarcity and ways to showcase authority in each thing that you do in marketing. Like there's tactics to each one of these, but the main thing is that you understand what the principle is, which is, do you know all these triggers and are you actually aware of them and integrating them in some capacity every single day? Remembering these is the key to understanding the behavior of your audience. And so when you understand how people behave, you can create your business, your marketing, and your sales to be in accordance with that behavior. So today is also what you consider to be the psychological triggers of marketing. I call them the mental triggers of marketing. And so these are the 6 mental triggers. I kind of want to go back to what I started with, which is the aspect of like, this is not something that I knew coming out the gate into business. So if you're like, this was all new to me, then that's great. This means that this is like the first stage of you getting the awareness of these to start to integrate them. The thing that I want to say is like, this is one aspect of marketing. And so something I've talked about on other episodes, but I want to refresh you on is content and marketing are not the same. They are not the same. The analogy that I give to people is marketing is the intention that we have for something to have an associated action. For example, if I want someone to move in a certain amount of time, that's marketing. The TikTok that it goes out in, or the fact I make it a carousel, or the fact that I make it a podcast, that is just social media. It's not marketing. Marketing is the strategy of what we're doing, what we're saying, what we're communicating, and how we're communicating it with what intention to have someone do what. Like, is it meant to create visibility? Is it meant to nurture someone to want to be interested in working with us? Is it meant to get someone over the finish line? Is it meant to build trust? Is it meant to showcase authority? All of those are intentions that we have around outcomes and around certain associated achievements, really. When we have that, that's marketing. So the example I give to people is, think about an Amazon box or a present, right? Like when you have a present that you're going to bring to somebody, that is the marketing. The marketing is the present that's going to be getting delivered. The way in which it gets there, whether it's through car, bus, plane, bike, whatever, that is social media. Social media is the vehicle that we use to deliver the marketing. And it has its own strategy. There's no question. But if you know social media, but you don't know marketing, you're always going to find that you're having resistance with what you're doing. And that's not because you're not good at content. It's not because you're not good at social media. You just may not know the underbelly, the intention, the psychology, the goal, or the outcome we're looking to achieve. And that's why the social media is not doing what you want it to do. And so I just want to clarify that, because I think sometimes people can feel really frustrated with their content and with your social media, when really your social media is not the issue. Your marketing, i.e. the strategy behind the post, is what the disconnect is, not necessarily the post itself. So anyway, just want to clarify that piece for you. Today was the 6 mental triggers of marketing. I hope that was supportive for you and gave you a little masterclass in marketing psychology. Of course, as always, if you have questions, if you have follow-ups to this, feel free to shoot me a message in the DMs. Always love to hear from you. Shoot me a voice note. Shoot me anything that kind of hit home for you today. Always love to connect with you guys. And with all that being said, I will see you next Thursday for next week's episode. And until then, as always, stay ambitious.